All right. So here we have Naran, who's kind enough to join us on this channel and chat about some experiences he's had in his life. You mind to just say hi?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Hi, Angela. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. So I know a little bit about your story, your history, your life, and so forth, but I don't know a lot of details. So maybe let's just start back a ways and tell, kind of give us an idea of some of the sort of major events that have shaped maybe your interest in spirituality or whatever, however that plays out.
Well, I actually didn't have any type of interest in spirituality. However, I went through a really bad bus accident that happened probably 15 years ago. And in that accident, we were only 9 survivors out of 32.
Wow. And
one of my best friends passed away in the accident. And the bus rolled down from a hill, 500 meters, more or less. And I was conscious when it was rolling down. And at one point, I just passed out as well. And everything went pitch black. And I had an out-of-body experience that in the moment I couldn't recall, that I told actually my family, but I could not recall it until a few years ago.
So let me ask you about that. Mm-hmm. So when the bus started like rolling, or you knew, okay, something's wrong. We're rolling now. Do you remember what went through your mind? Was it fear immediately? Was it just total confusion, or what? Because I've never been anything like that. I've been in some like minor car accidents, but just curious how that plays out in your mind when it's so unexpected.
It was confusion. Yeah. It was, I was like, what's happening? Because I was sleeping and everything started vibrating. And then I started to see everything, how it was going upside down. And it was like in slow motion. Everything was in slow motion, as if time had kind of stopped in those moments, and the mind like pulls back and is this camera in slow motion, how it was rolling down. In few turns, probably 2 or 3, that I could see everything spinning, and I was floating in the air because the bus was falling down. I saw one of the seats hit me in the head and I passed out.
Wow. And then what was the next thing you remember after passing out?
I was walking out of the bus, which was upside down at the bottom, and see all the passengers spread and
wow,
and all the horrible stuff that comes with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. That must have been seriously traumatic.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
Was. I didn't know at the moment, but it was.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at the moment, it's just complete. You're stunned, I would imagine, just completely stunned. Yeah. And were you significantly injured yourself at that point, or?
Yeah, actually, one of my foot was completely separated from my body, but held by my skin.
Wow.
And I could still walk somehow, but I remember looking at it and I was like, I don't know, how can I walk? And I kept just walking out of the bus and helping other passengers that survived as well.
Yeah. Wow. Man. Now, from that point on, from the point where you came to and got out of the bus and started helping people, were you continuously conscious from then on?
Yes.
You were? Wow. And then how long did it take for like paramedics or help to get to you guys?
Probably like 4 hours. It was super dark and they had to pull us from like with ropes around our body, and because there were so many trees, and then pull me through the mud and the trees and the branches and everything.
Wow.
Scratching everywhere. So
I can imagine.
Pretty.
You don't mind me asking these questions, these detailed questions, okay? Because I'm sure you've processed a lot of this in many ways. For those 4 hours, I mean, what were you doing? Like, were you actually trying to help people and support people who are still alive and that sort of thing? Or was it just came to a point of just waiting for someone to come help, or?
Both. So I was waiting as well, and I was helping other passengers that were in distress, and I was just telling them, calm down, help is going to come, and helping them also see their injuries, because they could not, they were also in shock, and there were some passengers that had not seen their injuries, and I was like, lie down, and don't try to go, they're going to have to help us somehow. And
you know, that's really fascinating in a sense, right? That our bodies can actually turn the pain off in a sort of traumatic situation where, you know, it could be a survival instinct to be able to move or get away from something without having to feel the pain. But as you mentioned, like, it can also be counterproductive when you don't realize like you're significantly injured, and walking around on it could be dangerous.
Yeah. But in those moments, it's very, very intense what's going on, that I don't think I had time to think what was really going on, and I just went into survival mode and and moved through that.
I mean, it shows a lot of courage. Of course, it's like you at that point you can't even help what happens. But man, and did you have any survival training or medical training or anything before that? No,
not at all.
And then you were, I assume, airlifted or something to a hospital.
Yeah. We got us into a helicopter, and they got us into the hospital, and I was there for a while.
How long were you in the hospital?
Probably like a week, because of all the surgeries that need to be involved, and and like a week.
How was it? How was it processing it for that week? Were you? I'm sure you were mentally processing a lot, and emotionally. Was there help? Did they send people to talk with you, or counselors or therapists or anything like that?
Not at all. And I guess that was part of my process, because they actually put me in drugs. They gave me these anxiolytics, which I became dependent of, and it was horrible, because I could not live my emotions. I could not live the pain. I could not live the anger or the frustration or whatever the sadness and that I have to live now. As I went off the medication after so many years, but I didn't know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, of course. Yeah, benzodiazepines, man, can really lead to serious badness. They may be fine for very short term or something, but okay. And so you mentioned that you had an out of body experience. And then is that right? Is that how you said it?
Yeah.
And then at what point did you become aware of that?
So I was in Costa Rica in a retreat center, and I met two fabulous teachers, Dana and Ashana, that were doing breath work there. And I just didn't know what was breath work at that moment. And I remembered everything while I was breathing through that. One of my teachers came and said, like, what's that in your shoulder? And she touched my operation scar. And it was like a transportation to the moment. And then I remembered everything that happened.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel comfortable telling us about it?
So what I discovered years after is that when the bus crashed and I passed out, I actually was with my friend that passed away in the accident, and I was telling him, I don't want to go back. I don't want to. I'm gonna suffer. I'm gonna be in pain. I don't want to go back. And I remember he was there with many people, and I could not recognize anybody else that was there. The only person that I could talk and perceive as a person, it was him. And he told me, you can't stay and you have to go back. And then everybody surrounded me and pushed me back. And then I opened my eyes and I was back in the accident.
What was the space? Do you remember like the space of it? Was there a physical space you remember, or like something visually, or was there an energetic feel to it that felt different than, say, this?
Yeah, there was actually nothing there. It was just his presence. It was and the presence of the other ones that I could not recognize, but him I could completely recognize, and it was like if we were talking physically, but there was nobody, no body physically, or no body in itself either.
Yeah. Wow. And how long after the accident was this event with the breath work where this was recalled?
Probably like 7 years after.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And
something I can't remember the date
Sure.
exactly, but yeah, something like that.
And so at that point, so the 7 years after this accident, had you had spiritual interest at that point or anything, or you were just mostly recovering and getting back to life and doing your thing?
No, before the recall, yes, I had something happened prior to that. I was actually one of my teachers. Actually, when I go back a little bit, I was also I had another surgery on my shoulder, and when in the recovery period, they told me that I was not ever gonna feel my shoulder back again because they had pinched a nerve. So I spent like 7 years without feeling my arm completely. And 2 of my friends came over one day, and they had taken this course about Reiki, and they were like, "Oh, would you like to receive Reiki energy?" And I was very skeptical before all that, and I didn't want to know anything about spirituality or religion or anything of the sort, because of the conditioning of the past and my family and all that. But when they were laying my hands on me while I was standing, I started crying, and I was like, "What is this?" Like it was just an emotional release, which led me to take the course with them. And after like a year or so, the Reiki teacher invited me to a silent retreat, and she turned out to be a Zen master. I went to this silent retreat 3 days called Who Is In, and we will sit face to face to each other, and we will repeat the koan, who is in, tell me who is in, for 3 days straight. In those 3 days, by I think it's the second day, I think I can't remember either, but the teacher comes and gets you, and to see where you're at and to see how is it going. And she asked me the question. And by gazing in her eyes, I just disappeared in her eyes. And I just saw nothing, emptiness. And she told me, "Oh, you're good." And I remember I replied, "I know." But without knowing what I was saying. And it's like, then I snapped back, and I was like, "What happened?" And then she told me, "You have to go back and continue. Who is he?" And then I just continued. Yeah, it was pretty cool as experience, because it was, now I know it was a direct experience with the present moment. And which I realized after that time that something had happened to me. Like, I was so aware of my thoughts after that retreat, so aware of my words as well. And I remember very well after that time, I came back home and I was watching TV, and I was watching this show about the chefs doing a show about doing pastry and stuff. And there was this girl crying in front of the judge, and wanting his validation, and something just told me, like, why is she crying? Why is she needing like the validation of the chef when she has it all? And it was just that moment that struck me, and I was like, who is talking? And yeah, it went on and on.
Nice.
Yeah.
And was that that kind of clarity and openness that you're describing? Did it come with a sense of like a weight had been lifted, or a fluidity of life and emotional release, or anything like that?
No, actually, it was just pure awareness of thoughts. It was more of a, I know there is something more. Yeah. to what I can see and to what I've been thinking. It was like shattering my belief system in those moments. I was like, I don't know what, I don't even know anymore what to believe of what I think and what I've been receiving.
Was it unsettling? Did you think it was unsettling, or was it just more like curious?
It was curious. Yeah, it was not unsettling at all. It was actually fascinating in those moments. I was like, oh, I'm aware of all these things. And it was just curiosity that awakened in those moments. And I was like very happy for that because I could see myself now. I could observe my thoughts.
Yeah. And so how did things play out after you had the recall? What sort of, how did that integrate into your life, or did you just kind of move on and not think much about it, or?
Well, things kept unfolding, and I actually went there to find a way to wean off from the medication already a little bit faster, and I was working with psychedelics. And when I came back from Costa Rica, a friend had found this person that was sharing 5-MeO-DMT, and I hope that's okay if I share that.
It's fine with me.
When I had the experience of 5-MeO-DMT, for me was so intense that I disappeared. Like my identity was erased, as if they had just switched the breaker down and the breaker up again. And when I came back, I was a completely different person.
How so?
Maybe I would like to share about how that journey went, because then
please do.
Probably you will understand a little bit deeper of the realization that I had after that. But so we smoked it, and when I smoked it, I lie down, and as I was lying down, I could see my body started to dissolve into millions and millions of pieces, and it dissolved into powder, and then into nothing, and then I was shot towards the sky like a rocket, and super fast, impossible to describe. And I became this dot that was moving from one side to the other, like tick, 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 tick. And it felt like eternity there, and because it felt like years and years. And then that dot became super still, and then flat, and then everything became white, and I was everything, and I was nothing, and I was nobody, but I was everybody. And it was death and rebirth at the same time, and a lot was going on in everything was going on in that no time, no space, everything, nothing, void. I could describe it as also a void, as I was returning. And slowly as I was returning, I saw myself standing up, because we were like in a hill in a mountain, and it was covered of snow. And I could see myself in 3D. Like if I was observing myself from all angles, like a drone, like hovering around. It was quite intense. And this person was screaming, I don't know who I am. And I was in despair because I could not remember anything. I could not remember my part. I remember I was trying to remember my family, my parents, my past, my sister, and I could not recall anything. And slowly, as I was again coming back into the body, because it was like a zoom in, I could see waves and how everything was forming through through the space and time, and how was the time being reconstructed, and how the animated objects and unanimated objects also were coming together through sound. It was a deep sound, and I was that sound, and I was those waves, and I was that construction back into, until I came to this solid space, and then the next image I have is I'm crying on the ground like a baby that had just reborn, and it felt like a real rebirth.
And beautiful. Were there other people with you doing it as well, or did they just kind of watch you?
No, there was other people that did it the same day, but the only people around me was the facilitator and myself.
Did you find it impossible, or had no inclination to talk about this afterward to your facilitator or to anyone else?
I actually didn't talk about this for a long time. I explained partly after that, but I didn't understand what was that experience. Like, I didn't understand the experience. It was days after that I thought I had lost my mind, which I did. And many things that happened after that. Probably tonight will be the first time that I will speak about it.
Awesome. Yeah. So going through something like that, it's such a radical, I don't even know how to say it, reorganization of reality that to even far from being able to describe it or talk about it, to even process it in any way internally, what that is or how that happened, can take years, literally. It's such a fundamental dropping into maybe what I would just call the fabric of reality, that it's not surprising to me that coming out of it there was just nothing to say, and probably no way to even orient to what had happened at all, as you're just learning to reorient to time and space again like a newborn. But it was a beautiful story. I loved it. Now, so what happened? So then how did things play out afterward?
I also remember this detail of not feeling, because we were minus 15 Celsius.
Ooh.
And I could not feel the cold anymore, as if cold also had disappeared. And I was lying in the snow, and I was like, this is also in my head. Like, the cold is also in my head.
Yeah.
That was pretty amazing experience, because everything had just ended, and now I was walking around with no sense of the temperature either.
So also for anyone who doesn't know about 5-MeO, so the description of the experience of immense spans of time during this experience, with that said, how long would you say like the person watching you would have said this lasted?
30 minutes. It's quite fast.
Yeah.
And eternal, because there is nothing there. I felt like I lived lives there. It was very long in the sense of no reality on reality.
Yeah. So then what? How do you take that back into your life?
So I had to leave everything, my job, my partner, because I understood that whoever I was communicating with could not understand what I had gone through, and also all the beliefs that I thought I was had been destroyed or erased. And life was different. Like, I was perceiving things different, and I just felt this also relief of wanting to know, and the people around me that were in that time and my job didn't really align to what the self that had come back wanted to live anymore.
What were your
wanted to experience?
Sure, yeah, that's what I was going to ask. What were your inclinations at that point, or what were you more inclined to do, or what environments you were interested in being in, and so forth?
So before the experience?
After.
Well, then I started to read spirituality, because it was completely a spiritual experience, and to research what had I gone through. And then I found that it was a non-dual experience, as I heard other practitioners from the same, that shared exactly the same thing. And they were describing, I actually found them out probably a year ago. It took me a long time to find, again, more answers to that experience, and to find somebody that could describe it exactly as I lived it. I forgot the question that you asked.
Oh, I forgot it too. I guess I was just sort of asking what, afterward you mentioned that like things had changed as far as who your partner was, work, and so forth. What, you started reading spiritual. I think, what were you sitting a lot? Were you meditating? Did you sort of incline yourself to solitude, or?
Yeah. So I was meditating, and I was in solitude as well. And it was beautiful, because even though I was grieving the death of that, there was so much peace at the same time. And I was actually floating in clouds for like 6 months. I remember seeing the trees, and the trees seeing me at the same time. And everything was actually experiencing me as I was experiencing it.
Yeah.
And still does.
Yeah. Yeah. So people are always interested in this. Can you talk about, I know there's no way to talk about this, but it's interesting because everybody has a different way of trying to talk about it. But what is that experience of experiencing what the mind would call a literal object, like a literal thing over there, a picture on the wall, a light, the sky, to experience the underlying truth that whatever that is and whatever this is, there's not something fundamentally separating them, and there's not a them. And so it feels as if you're on both sides at once, perhaps. Or to me, I use the term intimacy a lot because it just feels intimate. There's a recognition of here and there at the same time, and there's this love for the truth that here and there is really just a practical way of speaking. It just feels like seeing myself from two sets of eyes at the same time, or feeling that in here. It's just they're not two. So I don't know how you describe that, or if you feel inclined to at all, but it is something that people start to investigate directly through this kind of inquiry. And sometimes it just hits you. Other times it takes a little bit of discernment and work to dig into and underneath the mental overlay that makes things appear to be dualistic.
Mm-hmm. So sometimes I actually don't perceive it like that. I actually come out of that awareness, but I'm able to see it like that too. And I ask myself, it's like if I could see both, I don't know if that makes sense, but as if I could also drop back in and out. I've also tried to describe it, and it's a mirror. And this goes back again to what I lived in the Zen retreat, that everything was a mirror of myself. But this became not just the other person; it became everything. And it is sensing me, and I am sensing it, or everything that is right now around me. In the chair, it's sensing me, how I sit, how I'm sitting on it, and I am also on the other side sensing how I sense it.
Yes, that's very clear. Also, there's a fascination about the apparent particles that make things up. And so this chair I'm sitting in, the sensation is also every single particle, molecule, energetic center in the chair and this body completely intertwined with one another. And each one is aware of the whole because each one is the whole. Mm-hmm. And that to me is just an endlessly fascinating experience energetically, right?
Yeah.
Also what you said that there's this fascinating, it's like a telescoping, like something can telescope in and out of the clear non-dual, but it's not even that. The non-dual experience and the conventional experience themselves are also married. They're also intertwined. The conventional meaning just the way we speak about things, the way the world looks in a conventional sense, let's just say the appearances. Those are also, in a sense, intermeshed with the non-dual, which creates a whole other dimension of experience that is, again, hard to talk about. And there's such fluidity to that. There's a fluidity from the person to what could never be described as even form. And it couldn't even be described as formless. It's beyond form and formlessness, right? So it's just a fluid, I don't know what, self-exploration, not self as a person, self as whatever this is and is not at the same time. Yeah, pretty fascinating.
It is, yeah. And it took me a long time to really grasp everything and understand it now the way I understand it. And it was a lot had to do with your videos and yes, that's exactly how is described now in my experience. And there were a lot of things that I didn't know, like the sound, when you were talking about sound, and I was like, yes, I've heard that. And I tried what you proposed to do. And I was like, absolutely. That's exactly it. And you've put a lot of words into my experience and described it the way I had read in other books, like Osho described it, or like Eckhart Tolle described it, or any other Adyashanti had described it. But it was never as precise, or it never resonated as much as in a grounded way as I was experiencing it, without that pedestal that I had put in my head for all these people.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? And there's a lot about this that it just helps us to know our own psychology. The simple way we think of things in terms of better and worse, and tribalism, and my group versus your group, and higher status versus lower status. We don't think that sneaks in as much to our perception, but it kind of does. It's kind of interesting, right? And so I appreciate that. I've really made an effort to just come across as just a regular person, because I am a regular person. Although I know every regular person has access to their infinite nature, and also what's beyond anything to do with you. And at some point it's going to go there. So I guess I'm curious about emotion work, because no one, as clearly as you're describing, no one, from what I see, people don't come to this kind of clarity without like a hell of a lot of emotion work. And sometimes it's basically life brings it to you through tragedy, through things like, the bus accident and that. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on emotion work, or some reflections, or perhaps anything that could help anyone who's listening to this, who maybe has gone through similar things or tragedies themselves.
Well, everything was triggered by the accident, of course, and the dependence on the medication, because that is for me my biggest work that I've done emotionally, because I didn't ever process all those years that I was on the medication, and not just from the accident, but also what I was living throughout the years that got accumulated. And now that I am tapering off of them, it's been so intense that every night that I go to sleep is like if I was on a bad trip on LSD for hours. And it's a surrendering and surrendering and surrendering, and feeling everything, and melting and disappearing over and disappearing again. And and also observing myself throughout the day. What am I saying? What am I observing about myself in others? What is part of me that I can see in people, objects, my dogs, my plants when they're sad, and the weather, and all these sort of messages that are being sent, so they can point me into, oh, that's that too, and oh, it's that thing that I have not seen about myself. Oh, are those words that I just said are for me? And this, what we're having right now, is also for me, is a part of the journey that I had not spoken about to anybody, not even to my closest friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing it here. For sure.
You. And also, by doing breath work with my teachers, they were able to help me out through so much of those repressed emotions. And I was able to feel a lot of, meet all that with love and compassion, and with a lot of acceptance. And that's how I move through my emotions now, by allowing them and embracing them and listening to them too.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. You know, boy, I'm sure people who are going to listen to this are going to think, man, this is a wild and crazy story. There are going to be people who actually resonate, I'm sure, and have maybe gone through similar experiences. But I just want to say that where the rubber meets the road with so much of this stuff is what we're talking about, emotion work. Regardless of whether this is a steep path, a spontaneous path, an intentional path, however it goes for you, whether you're a Christian mystic or a Buddhist or atheist, whatever. What I see is the difference between when it goes, reasonably smoothly, and it won't always. It's just not like that. But when it goes reasonably smoothly and integrates well, and you integrate well in a conventional sense to life, is when the emotion work is being done with vulnerability, honesty, directness, humility. Yeah. When it's not, that's really when people get turned around with this stuff. And it can look a lot of different ways. It can look like a drug addiction. It can look like other types of addictions for sure. It can look like a personality disorder and things like that. But it doesn't really matter what the story is with this. This is the equalizer. You can't bypass this stuff. At some point, you've got to face it. Yeah. And then what you find out is like, good emotion work and integration and equanimity is actually what stabilizes these insights. It does. It stabilizes the non-dual into this just beautiful, tactile, visceral love for being alive and love for other people. And then you can actually, it's no big deal to interact with others because you don't worry about them reflecting in you something you don't want to see, because you want to see everything. And when I want to see everything here, I want to see everything there too. I'll go to the depth of your pain with you and just feel it and cry and whatever we need to do. It's fine. Right. And that becomes powerful medicine for anyone you come in contact with, or anything, even an animal or just taking care of the moment. That's it. And so I can feel just talking to you, even compared to when I talked to you before, which was quite a while ago, maybe like 6 months ago, or I don't know.
More or less.
It was quite a while, yeah. But I mean, even since then, like the softness and the gentleness comes forward so beautifully, and there's no doubt in my mind you're doing good work with the emotion work and so forth. Also, I wanted to reflect the stuff about breath work. I had not really done breath work myself, other than some Zen stuff years ago, but recently did a breath work in a group setting. It was wonderful. It's really cool. And so anyone listening, man, if you haven't done it, check it out. It's, with a good facilitator, a nice group, it's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, it is a passion, and it's something that brought a lot of light to my journey. And working with my teachers, it's been very transformational on the emotional level, and also to hold myself accountable for my own, for whatever is coming through me. It brought a lot of, there is a lot of, I did a lot of shadow work, as they call it, through breath work. It was very integrative therapy for me. And yeah, I know I get to share it, and it's just such a beautiful way to give back for me. And yeah.
So one other question that came to me, and you may or may not have any insights that just come about it, but what about people who struggle with addiction, whether it's to a substance, to a medication that was prescribed or is prescribed, but something in them says, I know I want to wean off of this, or I know something about this is not completely holistic, or it's helping me avoid emotion or something. Just in your experience, do you have any advice for that, or ways to approach it, or?
Courage. I would just say courage. And to listen as well. That is a teacher. That is what has been teaching me all that I am, all the parts that I am and that I ignored, and it has helped me also to see clearly, to see clearly the reality that I was avoiding, and even if there is struggle, that this is the only way to get out is to face it, as in everything, is it, to look at it with love and compassion, as I'm looking myself with the same lens, to look at that as I'm looking myself.
Yes, I totally, I'm with you there. When you start to feel that kind of compassion for what you used to think was the worst thing in you, whatever it is, whether it's an addiction, whether it's selfish, what we might call a selfish tendency, like when you look at things closely enough and with enough love, they become very good teachers. They show you maybe areas that you were actually denying yourself, perhaps, or again, bypassing an experience that you thought was the last thing you wanted to feel. When you finally fully feel it, you realize, oh my God, this is what I always wanted to feel, right? I mean, it's crazy, but that's what we do. And I also just wanted to point out, like, what I pick up from you is a reasonably common pattern I see is the combination of someone who's exquisitely sensitive, and you're very, very sensitive energetically, obviously. But the combination of that plus insight, plus really, especially extreme insight, like radical non-dual experiences and things, that combination is beautiful for it's wonderful for awakening, but you got to watch for the avoidant aspect of it, right? The tendency to, like disassociate or go into nothingness, or, we will all have that tendency at times. Anyone who goes through this process, there will be times when we would rather just disassociate from life or just not be there. And that is a very important part of reality that we've discovered, right? The no thingness, the absolute, and so forth. But it doesn't exist independent of the relative. It doesn't exist independent of the physical energetics of the human being walking on the earth. And when those two are experienced, let's say in harmony together, it's beyond. It's radically inward and radically outward at the same time. It's nothing better than the absolute and the relative completely merged. I don't know what else to say about that. Adyashanti once talked about this. I heard him talk it just once. I heard him go down this road, and he said, it starts to look a whole lot like heaven on earth. That's a pretty radical thing to say, but I agree with him, actually. When the suffering is so embraced that nothing is left out, nothing is left out. The most lost child, of an emotion or whatever can come here. It has not only a home here, it has all my attention and love. That's a kind of acceptance that just opens up this palpable love that is also shunyata. It's also emptiness, but it can be both at the same time. Yeah.
And I just wanted to mention that what I experienced, it was that the love that I thought or the word love had completely transformed. And in the darkness of it all, love transforms. Mm-hmm. Love appears in an unexpected way, which my mind thought knew what was love up until I experienced it, the deepest pain. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That is like love and beautiful and roses and flowers. It's a raw love.
It's beautiful. Adyashanti I've heard him call that redemptive love. You have to feel that you are going here, whether you like it or not. Yeah. But it's exactly where you really want to go. You can't. It's such a paradox. This, but what you said is so true, and it's so right on the money.
Also, for me, it has also changed the perspective of what's good or bad, because what I thought it was my worst nightmare, now it's becoming the peace of heaven that I am.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That I'm experiencing.
I'm happy to hear you say that. I don't think we have anything more to talk about. It's been such a good conversation. I think people are going to get a lot out of it, and I feel like let's not put any more stories on, unless there's anything else you want to say. Anything else you want to add for anyone who watches, and we can always have a conversation another time as well.
That the struggle is the teacher, the pain is the teacher, the suffering is the teacher, everything that we think that it is harming us is it. That is the transformation tool.
Yeah. I talk a lot. I frequently will mention how I felt before awakening when I was 24. And I'll say it was brutal. It was like a torture up here for me. And I can say it now easily because it's been a long time, and I'm sure people have heard me say it. But when I was in it, it was horrible. It felt so horrific. And yet the way I see it now is like, thank God. Like, thank you. I was so thankful that it felt that bad, because it forced me to look very, very deeply. Not just a little deep, like all the way to the bottom. So exactly what you're saying. I mean, the way of suffering, and it doesn't mean make yourself suffer. It doesn't mean torture yourself with painful practices. It really means open your heart and turn inward to your own suffering, and embrace it, and go where you need to go. And it will be difficult. It'll be dark, but it's okay. And it will be surprising. But that's all. It all turns out really okay. Yeah, and so we carry around that possibility all the time. Just it's here for anyone who wants to just turn and start the journey inward.
Yeah, and I appreciate you for that, because when you were talking about suffering, when I've heard it from other speakers or other teachers, it didn't resonate. But when you were talking so raw about it and so transparently about it, that was like, yeah, that's it. And it opened a huge door for me.
I'm good. Yeah. I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for your time. This has been a real pleasure. I didn't really think much about how we were going to converse, but it turned out so good. And I know people are going to get so much out of this. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your effort and your willingness to work and dig in and all the stuff you've been doing and continue to do. And we'll have a conversation at some time in the future, I'm sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.